Maria Washington had been working as a nanny for wealthy families in Manhattan for over 15 years. At 52, she had seen everything from spoiled children throwing tantrums to parents who barely knew their own kids' favorite colors. But nothing had prepared her for the chaos she walked into that Tuesday morning at the Henderson mansion. The sound hit her before she even reached the front door. A baby's piercing cries echoed through the marble hallways, mixing with frantic voices and hurried footsteps. Maria used her key to enter, hanging her worn coat on the golden hook by the entrance. The crying grew louder as she climbed the grand staircase, her soft-soled shoes silent against the polished wood. In the nursery, she found Mrs. Henderson pacing back and forth, her designer dress wrinkled and her usually perfect hair falling in messy strands around her face. Baby Emma, just 8 months old, was red-faced and screaming in her mother's arms. 2 other nannies stood nearby looking helpless and exhausted. "She won't stop crying," Mrs. Henderson said, her voice cracking with desperation. "She's been like this for 3 hours. We've tried everything, bottles, diapers, rocking, singing. Nothing works. The pediatrician said she's healthy, but something is clearly wrong." Maria had raised 4 children of her own before becoming a nanny. She recognized that particular cry. Not hunger, not tiredness, but something deeper. She gently took Emma from Mrs. Henderson's trembling arms. The baby's cries softened slightly at the change, but tears still streamed down her tiny cheeks. "Sometimes babies cry because they sense tension," Maria said quietly, bouncing Emma gently. "When everyone around them is stressed, they feel it too. Has anything changed in the house lately?" Mrs. Henderson's face crumpled. "My husband has been working 18-hour days. We barely see him anymore. And I don't know what I'm doing wrong. I love her so much, but I feel like I'm failing her every day." Maria nodded, understanding. She had seen this before in wealthy families where success in business didn't automatically translate to confidence in parenting. "May I try something different?" she asked softly. Without waiting for an answer, Maria carried Emma toward the kitchen. She had noticed something during her years of caring for children. Food prepared with love and intention had a special power. Not just any food, but meals made the way her grandmother had taught her, with ingredients that nourished both body and soul. In the Hendersons' massive kitchen, Maria found what she needed. She pulled out sweet potatoes, carrots, and a small piece of chicken breast. While Emma continued to fuss in her arms, Maria began preparing what her own grandmother had called comfort food for the spirit. "What are you making?" Mrs. Henderson asked, watching as Maria worked with one hand while holding the baby with the other. "My grandmother's recipe," Maria replied, mashing the sweet potato with a fork. "She always said that food made with prayer and love could heal more than just hunger. When my own babies were upset, this always helped." She mixed the sweet potato with a tiny bit of the cooked carrot, creating a smooth orange puree. The kitchen filled with the warm, earthy smell of the vegetables. Something magical happened as Maria worked. Emma's cries began to quiet, as if she could sense the care being put into her meal. Maria tested the temperature on her wrist, then offered a small spoonful to Emma. The baby's eyes widened and she opened her mouth eagerly. As she ate, her crying stopped completely for the first time in hours. "How did you know?" Mrs. Henderson whispered, tears forming in her eyes as she watched her daughter eat peacefully. Maria smiled, wiping Emma's chin gently. "Sometimes we overthink parenting. We buy the most expensive organic food, the best cribs, the finest clothes. But what babies really need is simple: love, attention, and food prepared with care. My grandmother always said that when you cook for someone, you put a piece of your heart into the food." As Emma finished eating, she relaxed completely in Maria's arms, her little hand reaching up to touch the nanny's face. For the first time that day, the baby smiled. Mrs. Henderson watched in amazement. "I've never seen her so calm." "What did you put in that food?" "Nothing special," Maria replied. "Just sweet potato, carrot, and love." But I think what she really needed was to feel that someone understood her. Babies are much smarter than we give them credit for. They know when someone truly cares. The transformation in the nursery was remarkable. The tension that had filled the room for hours melted away as Emma cooed softly, playing with Maria's fingers. Mrs. Henderson sat down in the rocking chair, looking exhausted but relieved. "Will you teach me?" she asked quietly. "I want to learn how to make food like that for her." Maria nodded, settling into the chair beside her. "Of course. But first, you need to understand something important. It's not really about the recipe. It's about slowing down, being present, and putting your whole heart into caring for her. That's what she was crying for, not just food, but connection. As if to prove Maria's point, Emma reached out toward her mother, making happy baby sounds. Mrs. Henderson carefully took her daughter, and for the first time that day, Emma remained calm and content in her mother's arms. The afternoon sun streamed through the nursery windows, casting a warm glow over the peaceful scene. Maria began telling Mrs. Henderson about her grandmother's cooking philosophy, about how every meal was an act of love, and how that love could be felt by anyone who ate the food. What neither woman knew was that this simple moment, a nanny, comforting a baby with homemade food, would soon attract the attention of someone who would change all their lives forever. 3 days after the incident with baby Emma, Mrs. Henderson couldn't stop talking about Maria's magical touch with children. She called her sister, her mother, and her best friends, telling everyone about the nanny who had saved the day with a simple homemade meal. Word spread quickly through their wealthy social circle, and soon Maria found herself in high demand. But it was Mrs. Henderson's brother-in-law, David Chen, who would prove to be the most important person to hear the story. David was a successful venture capitalist who specialized in family and childcare businesses. When his wife mentioned Maria's name over dinner, something clicked in his mind. "Tell me more about this nanny," David said, setting down his fork. What exactly did she do that was so special? His wife, Sarah, launched into the story she had heard from Mrs. Henderson. She made this homemade baby food from scratch, and somehow it calmed Emma down when nothing else would work. But it wasn't just the food. She taught my sister how to be more present with the baby, how to put love into everything she does for Emma. David's business mind started working. He had been looking for innovative childcare concepts to invest in, and something about this story intrigued him. The next day he called Mrs. Henderson and asked if he could meet this remarkable nanny. Maria was surprised when Mrs. Henderson asked her to stay after work on Friday for a meeting with a family friend. She assumed it was another wealthy parent looking for childcare recommendations. When David Chen arrived at the Henderson mansion, Maria was in the kitchen preparing Emma's evening meal. "You must be Maria," David said, entering the kitchen. He was a tall, well-dressed Asian man in his 40s with kind eyes and an easy smile. "I'm David Chen. I've heard incredible things about your work with children." Maria wiped her hands on her apron and smiled politely. "Nice to meet you, Mr. Chen. Mrs. Henderson said you wanted to speak with me." David watched as Maria finished preparing Emma's dinner, carefully mashing fresh vegetables, testing the temperature, and adding what looked like herbs from a small garden container on the windowsill. Everything she did was deliberate and filled with care. "I'm interested in your approach to childcare," David said, "particularly your cooking methods. Can you tell me where you learned to make baby food like this?" Maria looked puzzled but answered honestly. "My grandmother taught me when I was young. She raised 12 children and always said that food was medicine for both body and heart. When I had my own children, I used her recipes. Now I use them for the families I work with." "And do you write these recipes down?" David asked, pulling out a small notebook. "Some of them," Maria replied, "but most are just in my memory, passed down through talking and watching. My grandmother never used measuring cups. She cooked by feel, by love." David's excitement grew as Maria spoke. Here was someone with authentic knowledge, real experience, and a genuine gift for nurturing children. But more than that, she had something that couldn't be taught in business school. Wisdom passed down through generations. "Maria, what would you say if I told you that your knowledge could help thousands of families, not just the ones you work for directly?" Maria looked confused. "I'm not sure what you mean, Mr. Chen." David sat down at the kitchen counter, his mind racing with possibilities. "I'm a businessman who invests in companies that help families. What you do, the way you care for children, your cooking methods, your understanding of what babies and children really need, this could be the foundation of something much bigger." "Like what?" Maria asked, still not understanding where this conversation was heading. "Like a company that teaches other nannies and parents your methods. Like a line of baby food made with your recipes and your philosophy. Like childcare centers that operate on your principles of love and connection." Maria sat down across from him, overwhelmed. "Mr. Chen, I just cook for babies. I'm not a businesswoman." "But you are an expert," David insisted. "You have knowledge that money can't buy. You have 15 years of experience with children from all kinds of families. And most importantly, you have results. Every family you work with talks about the positive changes you bring to their children's lives. He pulled out his phone and showed Maria some research he had done over the past few days. The childcare industry is worth over $50 billion a year, but most childcare services focus on convenience, not connection. Most baby food companies focus on nutrition facts, not emotional nourishment. You've found something that combines both. Maria shook her head slowly. I don't know anything about business, Mr. Chen. I barely finished high school. I'm just a nanny who learned to cook from her grandmother. That's exactly why this could work, David said, his voice growing more excited. Parents are tired of artificial solutions. They want authenticity. They want someone who understands children, not someone who just studied child development in a textbook. At that moment, Mrs. Henderson entered the kitchen carrying Emma, who immediately reached for Maria with a happy squeal. Maria took the baby naturally, and Emma settled contentedly in her arms, playing with the wooden spoon Maria had been using to stir the vegetables. See that? David said, pointing to the interaction. That's what parents want for their children. That natural connection, that joy, that peace. You create that wherever you go. Mrs. Henderson looked between David and Maria, sensing something important was happening. Is everything okay? David thinks I should start some kind of business, Maria said, still holding Emma. But I don't know anything about running a company. You wouldn't run it alone, David said quickly. I would provide the business expertise, the funding, the connections. You would provide the heart, the knowledge, the authentic approach that makes everything work. Mrs. Henderson's eyes widened. Maria, this could be incredible for you. Think about all the children you could help. Maria looked down at Emma, who was babbling happily and trying to put the wooden spoon in her mouth. She thought about her own children, now grown, and how her grandmother's wisdom had helped her raise them. She thought about all the families she had worked with over the years, and how many had struggled with the same basic challenges of connection and care. What would I have to do? Maria asked quietly. David smiled, sensing that she was beginning to consider the possibility. First, we would document your recipes and methods. Then we would test them with other families to prove they work consistently. After that, we would develop products and services based on your approach. And you think people would want this? Maria asked. I think parents are desperate for this, David replied. In a world full of artificial solutions and quick fixes, you offer something real, something that actually works. Maria was quiet for a long moment, rocking Emma gently as she thought. Finally, she looked up at David. If this could really help more children and families, then maybe we should try. David's smile grew wider. Maria, I think you're about to become much more than just a nanny. I think you're about to become a pioneer. 2 weeks after her conversation with David Chen, Maria found herself in a situation she never could have imagined. David had arranged for her to meet with Dr. James Morrison, a billionaire tech entrepreneur who had recently become a father for the first time at age 45. Dr. Morrison had built his fortune creating software that connected people around the world, but he was struggling to connect with his own newborn son, Theo. Meeting took place at Morrison's penthouse apartment overlooking Central Park. Maria arrived carrying her worn leather bag filled with cooking supplies and baby food ingredients, feeling completely out of place in the marble and gold lobby. When the private elevator opened directly into Morrison's home, she stepped into a world that looked more like a museum than a place where a baby lived. Dr. Morrison was a tall, thin man with graying hair and tired eyes. He greeted Maria professionally, shaking her hand with the same efficiency he probably used in business meetings. Ms. Washington, David speaks very highly of your work. I understand you have some unique approaches to infant care. I just try to give babies what they need, Maria said simply, looking around the spotless apartment. Everything was white, black, or silver. There were no toys visible, no comfortable chairs for feeding or rocking a baby, no signs that a child lived here at all. My son Marcus is 3 months old, Dr. Morrison continued, leading her toward what he called the nursery. We have the best of everything. A baby nurse trained at the finest institutions, organic formula imported from Switzerland, a crib that monitors his breathing and sleep patterns. But he cries constantly, barely sleeps, and refuses to eat properly. The nursery looked like a medical facility. Every surface was sterile white, with high-tech monitors displaying the baby's vital signs. Marcus lay in an elaborate crib surrounded by sensors and cameras, whimpering softly. A uniformed nurse sat nearby, checking numbers on various devices. Maria's heart broke looking at the scene. The baby was clean, well-dressed, and technically well cared for, but the room felt cold and disconnected. She walked over to the crib and looked down at Marcus, who stopped whimpering and looked up at her with curious eyes. "Hello, sweet boy," Maria said softly, reaching down to gently stroke his cheek. "You're trying to tell everyone something, aren't you?" Dr. Morrison watched as Maria spoke to his son. "The pediatrician says he's perfectly healthy. All his test results are normal. But he seems unhappy all the time. May I hold him?" Maria asked. Dr. Morrison nodded, and Maria carefully lifted Marcus from his high-tech crib. The moment she held him against her warm body, the baby relaxed completely. His crying stopped, and he snuggled into her shoulder with a soft sigh. "How did you do that?" Dr. Morrison asked, amazed. "He never stops crying for us." Maria walked around the sterile nursery, bouncing Marcus gently. "He's not crying because something is wrong with him physically. He's crying because he feels disconnected. Babies need warmth, not just in temperature, but in emotion. They need to feel love and security." She turned to face Dr. Morrison. "When was the last time you held him without checking a monitor or worrying about doing something wrong?" Dr. Morrison looked uncomfortable. I'm not sure. I worry about hurting him. He seems so fragile, and I'm not experienced with babies. The nurse handles most of his care. And when was the last time he had food that was made specifically for him, with love and attention?" Maria continued. "He drinks formula," Dr. Morrison replied. "The best money can buy." Maria nodded understandingly. "Formula can provide nutrition, but at 3 months he's ready for some real food made with care. More importantly, he needs to feel that someone is putting love into caring for him, not just following medical protocols." She asked Dr. Morrison to show her to the kitchen. Like everything else in the apartment, it was impressive but unused. The refrigerator was filled with expensive organic ingredients, but it was clear that no one actually cooked there. "Would you be willing to let me prepare something for Marcus?" Maria asked. "And would you be willing to learn how to do it yourself?" Dr. Morrison hesitated. "I'm not good at cooking. I usually eat at restaurants or have food delivered." "This isn't about being good at cooking," Maria said, still holding the now peaceful Marcus. "This is about showing your son that you care enough to put effort into nurturing him. Babies can feel the difference between someone going through the motions and someone acting out of love." With Dr. Morrison watching nervously, Maria began preparing a simple meal for Marcus. She selected a sweet potato and a carrot, explaining each step as she worked. "My grandmother always said that when you prepare food for someone, you should think good thoughts about them. As I cook this, I'm thinking about how Marcus deserves to feel loved and secure." Dr. Morrison watched intently as Maria peeled and steamed the vegetables, then mashed them carefully by hand. "Why don't you use the food processor?" he asked, pointing to an expensive machine on the counter. "Because this is about more than efficiency," Maria explained. "When you take time to do something by hand, you put more of yourself into it. Marcus will taste the difference." As the kitchen filled with the warm smell of the cooking vegetables, something remarkable happened. Dr. Morrison began to relax. He asked questions about Maria's methods, about her grandmother's wisdom, about how she had learned to understand what babies needed. "I built a company worth billions by solving complex problems with technology," Dr. Morrison said quietly. "But I can't figure out how to make my own son happy." "That's because this isn't a problem to be solved," Maria replied, testing the temperature of Marcus's food. "It's a relationship to be built. Technology can do many amazing things, but it can't replace human connection." She handed Dr. Morrison the bowl of homemade baby food and showed him how to hold his son while feeding him. At first, Dr. Morrison was nervous, but as Marcus ate eagerly and looked up at his father with bright, happy eyes, the billionaire's face transformed. "He's actually enjoying this," Dr. Morrison whispered, as if afraid to break the spell. "He's enjoying you," Maria corrected. "For the first time, you're not worried about monitors or protocols. You're just being his father." As Marcus finished eating, he reached up and grabbed his father's finger, holding on tight. Dr. Morrison's eyes filled with tears. "I've been so focused on giving him the best of everything that I forgot to give him the most important thing, myself." Maria smiled, watching the connection form between father and son. That's what all children really want. Not perfect care, but caring parents. Not expensive things, but genuine love. Dr. Morrison looked at Maria with new respect. David was right about you. You don't just take care of children, you teach people how to be better parents. I just share what my grandmother taught me, Maria said. But maybe that's what the world needs more of. Simple wisdom about love and connection. As she prepared to leave that day, Dr. Morrison made a request that would change everything. Maria, I want to invest in David's plan to build a company around your methods. But more than that, I want to learn from you. Would you consider working with my family regularly? Maria looked at the man who had seemed so cold and businesslike just hours earlier, now gently rocking his son with tears of joy in his eyes. I would be honored, she said. Neither of them knew that this meeting would lead to something far bigger than either had imagined. 6 months after Dr. Morrison became Maria's first high-profile client, word about her remarkable abilities had spread through the most exclusive circles in New York City. CEOs, celebrities, and wealthy families were all requesting her services, but Maria remained committed to working with just a few families at a time. She believed that rushed care was no care at all. Dr. Morrison had become like a different person. His penthouse was now filled with warmth, soft blankets, comfortable rocking chairs, and the smell of homemade baby food cooking regularly. Most importantly, Marcus had transformed from a crying, restless infant into a happy, thriving baby who laughed often and slept peacefully through the night. The change was so dramatic that Dr. Morrison couldn't help but share the story with his business associates. During a board meeting of his tech company, he mentioned how a nanny had revolutionized his approach to fatherhood using simple, traditional methods. You're talking about food and love like they're business strategies, laughed Richard Blake, a fellow billionaire who sat on Morrison's board. Come on, James, how different could one nanny really be? Dr. Morrison pulled out his phone and showed a video of Marcus giggling while eating homemade sweet potato puree. Richard, my son was miserable for his first 3 months of life despite having the best medical care money could buy. Maria changed everything in one afternoon using vegetables and wisdom from her grandmother. Richard studied the video, seeing the joy on both the baby's face and Dr. Morrison's. As a newly divorced father struggling to connect with his own 2 young children during weekend visits, Richard felt a pang of recognition. His kids always seemed uncomfortable around him, preferring their mother and seeming to tolerate their time together rather than enjoy it. Would she be willing to meet with me? Richard asked quietly. My situation is different, but I could use some help connecting with my kids. Dr. Morrison immediately called Maria, explaining Richard's request. Maria agreed to meet with Richard, but she had one condition. She wanted to understand his family situation first, not just provide quick solutions. When Richard arrived at Maria's modest apartment in Queens the following Saturday, he was surprised by the warmth and comfort of her home. Unlike the cold luxury he was used to, Maria's place felt lived in and loved. Photos of children and grandchildren covered every surface, and the smell of something delicious cooking filled the air. Mr. Blake, Maria said, greeting him at the door. Please call me Maria, would you like some coffee? I just made fresh bread. Richard, who usually conducted all his meetings in boardrooms or restaurants, found himself sitting at Maria's kitchen table eating warm homemade bread while telling her about his struggles with his children. Emma is 8 and Michael is 5, Richard explained. Since the divorce, they come to stay with me every other weekend. But they always seem sad or bored when they're at my place. I've bought them every toy they could want, taken them to expensive restaurants and shows. But nothing seems to work. Maria listened carefully while she prepared ingredients for the bread she was planning to bake with Richard's children. Tell me about what you do during these visits, she said. Well, I pick them up Friday evening and usually take them out to dinner somewhere nice. Saturday, we might go to a museum or an amusement park. Sunday, I take them to brunch before bringing them back to their mother. And do you cook for them? Maria asked. Richard looked surprised. Cook? No, I don't really cook. I have a housekeeper who prepares meals during the week, but on weekends we usually eat out. Do you spend quiet time together? Just talking or playing at home? My apartment isn't really set up for children, Richard admitted. It's more designed for entertaining business associates. I figured they'd prefer going out and doing exciting things. Maria nodded understandingly. Mr. Blake, children don't need excitement all the time. They need connection. They need to feel useful and important. Most of all, they need to see that you enjoy simply being with them, not just taking them places, she suggested, something that initially made Richard uncomfortable. canceling all the elaborate weekend plans and instead having the children come help her teach him how to cook for them. I don't think they'd be interested in cooking, Richard protested. They're used to restaurants and activities. Children love feeling helpful and important, Maria assured him. And they love seeing adults learn new things. Trust me on this. The following Friday, Richard picked up Emma and Michael as usual, but instead of heading to a fancy restaurant, he brought them to Maria's apartment. The children were initially confused but became excited when Maria explained they were going to teach their father how to make dinner. Daddy doesn't know how to cook? 5-year-old Michael asked in amazement. Not yet, Maria said with a smile, but that's why we're here. Everyone can learn new things, even grown-ups. What happened next amazed Richard. His children, who were usually quiet and reserved around him, became animated and talkative as they helped measure ingredients and mix dough for homemade pizza. Emma carefully showed him how to roll out the dough while Michael giggled as he helped spread sauce with a wooden spoon. Daddy, you're getting flour everywhere, Emma laughed, the first genuine laugh Richard had heard from her in months. I guess I need more practice, Richard said, genuinely enjoying himself for the first time during a visit with his children. Maria watched from across the kitchen as the family worked together. She saw Richard's face relax as he focused on the simple task of making food with his children, instead of worrying about entertaining them. She saw Emma and Michael become more confident and helpful as they took on the role of teachers. As they waited for the pizza to bake, Maria suggested they make dessert together. The children eagerly agreed, and soon they were all covered in flour and chocolate chips, laughing as they made cookies from scratch. This is the most fun we've had in forever, Michael announced, hugging his father's leg while leaving a flowery handprint on Richard's expensive pants. Richard looked down at his son, then at Emma, who was carefully arranging chocolate chips on cookies with intense concentration. For the first time since his divorce, he felt like he was truly connecting with his children. Maria, he said quietly while the children were distracted with decorating cookies. How did you know this would work? Because cooking together creates shared purpose, Maria explained. Instead of you trying to entertain them, you're all working toward the same goal. Instead of being the person who takes them places, you become the person who learns with them and depends on their help. When the pizza was ready, they all sat around Maria's small dining table eating their homemade dinner. The children chattered excitedly about school, friends, and their week, talking more openly than they had with their father since the divorce began. Can we cook again next weekend? Emma asked as they finished their meal. Richard smiled, realizing that his expensive apartment with its sterile kitchen suddenly seemed less important than learning how to create these moments with his children. If Maria will teach us, we can cook every weekend. As they prepared to leave that evening, Michael hugged Maria goodbye and whispered, "Thank you for teaching Daddy how to have fun with us." Richard understood in that moment that Maria hadn't just taught him how to cook, she had taught him how to be a father. And he knew he would do anything to support her mission of helping other families find the same connection he had discovered that night. By the end of the year, Maria found herself at the center of something she had never expected. Dr. Morrison and Richard Blake had joined forces with David Chen to create Grandmother's Kitchen, a company built around Maria's philosophy of nurturing children through food and connection. But as their first investor meeting approached, Maria was having serious doubts about the whole venture. "I don't understand why we need all these business plans and presentations," Maria told David as they sat in her kitchen, reviewing documents for the upcoming meeting. "I just cook for babies and help families connect." "How did this become so complicated?" David tried to reassure her. "Maria, we need investors to help us reach more families. But you're right that we can't lose sight of what makes your approach special." The investor meeting was scheduled for the following week at Morrison's office building. Potential investors included some of the wealthiest people in New York, all interested in the childcare business opportunity. But Maria was nervous about presenting her simple grandmother's wisdom to a room full of billionaires. 3 days before the meeting, everything changed when Maria received an unexpected phone call from Rebecca Santos, a single mother who worked as a janitor in Dr. Morrison's building. Rebecca had overheard Morrison talking to his assistant about Maria's work with families and had gotten Maria's number from Mrs. Henderson. "Ms. Washington," Rebecca said nervously over the phone. "I know you work with rich families, but I was wondering if you might help me with my daughter Sophia. She's 2 years old and barely eats anything. The doctor says she's underweight, but I can't afford expensive organic food or a private nutritionist. Maria's heart immediately went out to Rebecca. Of course I'll help. Can you bring Sophia to my apartment this weekend? When Rebecca arrived on Saturday with little Sophia, Maria saw a tired young mother who was working 2 jobs to support her daughter. Sophia was indeed thin and seemed listless, showing little interest in the crackers her mother offered her. I feel like such a bad mother, Rebecca confessed as Sophia sat quietly on Maria's couch. I try to feed her, but she just picks at her food. I'm so busy working that most of our meals are fast food or frozen dinners. Maria knelt down to Sophia's level and spoke softly in Spanish, which made the little girl's eyes light up with interest. Hola, Sofía, ¿te gusta cocinar? Sophia nodded shyly and Maria took her small hand. Would you like to help me make something special for lunch? What happened next reminded Maria why she had started this work in the first place. Sophia, who had seemed withdrawn and uninterested in food, became animated as she helped Maria wash vegetables and stir ingredients. When they made simple rice and beans with fresh vegetables, Sophia ate enthusiastically, asking for seconds and thirds. I can't believe she's eating so much, Rebecca said, tears in her eyes. She never eats like this for me. It's not about expensive ingredients, Maria explained, showing Rebecca how to prepare the simple, nutritious meal. It's about taking time to involve her in the process and showing her that food is made with love. Maria spent the afternoon teaching Rebecca basic cooking techniques using affordable ingredients from any grocery store. She showed her how to make homemade baby food using regular vegetables, how to involve Sophia in age-appropriate cooking tasks, and most importantly, how to make mealtime a time of connection rather than stress. This is what your business should really be about, Rebecca said as she prepared to leave. Not just helping rich families, but helping all families. There are millions of mothers like me who need this knowledge but could never afford expensive consultants. Rebecca's words stayed with Maria all week. When the day of the investor meeting arrived, Maria made a decision that surprised everyone. The conference room at Morrison's building was filled with wealthy investors, all eager to hear about the business opportunity in premium childcare services. David Chen had prepared an elaborate presentation about target demographics, profit margins, and expansion plans. But when it was Maria's turn to speak, she set aside the prepared remarks and told a different story. This week, I met a young mother named Rebecca, who works as a janitor in this building, Maria began, surprising the room full of millionaires and billionaires. Her daughter Sophia wasn't eating properly, not because Rebecca couldn't afford good food, but because she didn't know how to make mealtime meaningful. She went on to describe her afternoon with Rebecca and Sophia, explaining how simple changes in approach had transformed the child's relationship with food. In 3 hours, using ingredients that cost less than $20, we solved a problem that doctors and expensive supplements couldn't fix. The investors listened politely, but Maria could see they were confused about where this story was leading. I know you're here because you see a business opportunity in what I do, Maria continued. And maybe there is one. But if we're going to build a company around my grandmother's wisdom, it has to serve all families, not just wealthy ones. Dr. Morrison, who had expected Maria to stick to the business plan, watched nervously as she continued. My grandmother didn't teach me these recipes so I could make money from them. She taught me because food made with love can heal families, bring people together, and help children thrive. If we're going to honor that legacy, then whatever we build has to be accessible to mothers like Rebecca, not just mothers who can afford premium services. The room was quiet for a moment. Then Margaret Chen, one of the investors and David's aunt, spoke up. Ms. Washington, are you suggesting we develop a business model that serves low-income families? I'm suggesting we develop a business model that serves all families, Maria replied. Because the need for connection and proper nutrition exists in every household, regardless of income. My grandmother's wisdom shouldn't be a luxury item. An older investor named Robert Sterling leaned forward in his chair. Ms. Washington, while your sentiment is admirable, businesses need to be profitable to survive. How do you propose we make money serving families who can't afford premium prices? Maria had been thinking about this question all week. The same way my grandmother fed 12 children during the Depression, by being smart about resources and focusing on what really matters. We don't need expensive organic ingredients or fancy equipment. We need knowledge, community, and systems that help families help each other. She walked to the whiteboard and began drawing a simple diagram. What if we created a program where families like Dr. Morrison's could sponsor families like Rebecca's? The wealthy families get expert consultation and personalized service. The working families get access to the same knowledge through community classes and online resources, funded by the premium services. David Chen watched in amazement as Maria outlined a business model that no one had discussed before. She proposed cooking classes in community centers, partnerships with pediatricians in low-income areas, and a mobile kitchen program that could bring nutritious meal preparation directly to neighborhoods that needed it most. The premium clients would essentially be funding a social mission, Maria continued. They get the personal attention they're paying for, but they also get the satisfaction of knowing their investment is helping other families. And the program becomes sustainable because we're serving the entire market, not just the top. Margaret Chen nodded thoughtfully. It's an interesting model. Cross-subsidization between market segments. But would wealthy clients really be willing to pay extra to fund services for others? Dr. Morrison stood up, surprising everyone. I would. In fact, I'd pay double what Maria currently charges if I knew that my payment was also helping families like Rebecca's access the same wisdom that transformed my relationship with my son. Richard Blake nodded in agreement. Same here. Maria didn't just help me connect with my children. She changed my entire understanding of what family means. That's worth any amount of money, and it's definitely worth sharing with others. The energy in the room began to shift as the investors realized they were looking at something unique, a business model that could be both profitable and genuinely beneficial to society. But how would you scale this? Asked another investor. You can't personally teach every family in America. Maria smiled. The same way my grandmother's knowledge reached me, by training others who can carry it forward. We identify women in communities who already have the trust and respect of local families. We teach them not just the recipes, but the philosophy behind them. They become the local experts, supported by our resources but rooted in their own communities. She described a network of community educators, each trained in both the practical skills of nutritious cooking and the relationship-building approaches that made Maria's work so effective. These educators would be supported by an online platform, regular training sessions, and connections to pediatric nutritionists and child development experts. It becomes a network of grandmothers, Maria explained, each one serving their own community, but all connected by the same principles of love, nutrition, and family connection. The room fell silent as the investors processed what they had heard. Finally, Margaret Chen spoke. Ms. Washington, you've just described something I've never seen before. A business plan that's driven by mission rather than just profit, but that could actually be more successful because of that focus. Dr. Morrison looked around the room at his fellow investors. I think what Maria's proposing could revolutionize not just childcare, but how we think about social impact business models. Instead of choosing between doing good and doing well, she's shown us how to do both. As the meeting ended, nearly every investor in the room committed to funding the expanded vision Maria had presented. But more importantly, they committed to helping recruit other families who would want to be part of a program that served their own children, while also supporting families in need. Rebecca Santos, who had unknowingly inspired this transformation, would soon become the first community educator hired by Grandmother's Kitchen, bringing Maria's wisdom to families throughout her neighborhood in Queens. Maria walked out of that boardroom knowing that her grandmother's legacy was about to reach further than either of them could have ever imagined. 18 months after that pivotal investor meeting, Grandmother's Kitchen had grown beyond anything Maria could have imagined. The company now operated in 12 cities across the United States, with community educators serving families from Manhattan penthouses to rural farming communities. But success had brought unexpected challenges that tested everyone's commitment to Maria's original vision. The first major crisis came when a large food corporation offered to buy Grandmother's Kitchen for $200 million. The offer was tempting to the investors, who saw an opportunity for massive returns on their investment. But Maria was deeply troubled by the corporation's plans to mass-produce her grandmother's recipes and sell them as premium baby food products. They want to put my grandmother's sweet potato recipe in jars, and sell it in fancy stores for $8 each. Maria told Dr. Morrison during an emergency meeting at his office. They're talking about hiring celebrity spokespersons and creating marketing campaigns about authentic grandmother wisdom. But there's nothing authentic about a factory-made product sold for profit. Dr. Morrison understood Maria's concerns, but he also felt pressure from other investors who were excited about the financial opportunity. Maria, we could use that money to expand the community programs even faster. Think about how many more families we could help with $200 million. But we'd lose the heart of what we're doing, Maria replied. My grandmother didn't teach me these recipes so they could be turned into expensive products for wealthy families. She taught me so that knowledge could be passed from person to person, with love and care. The tension came to a head during a board meeting where the corporate offer was formally presented. The pharmaceutical company's representatives explained their vision for Grandmother's Kitchen products in grocery stores nationwide, complete with scientific studies proving the nutritional benefits of Maria's recipes. We see this as a win-win situation, explained the corporation's CEO, a polished woman in her 50s. Grandmother's Kitchen gets the resources to expand globally, and we get access to proven recipes that can help children everywhere eat better. Maria listened quietly until she was asked to speak. Then she stood up and told a story that changed everything. Last month I visited one of our community centers in Detroit. Maria began. I met a grandmother named Dorothy, who was raising her 3 grandchildren after their parents died in a car accident. Dorothy came to our cooking classes not because she didn't know how to cook, but because she was struggling to get the children to eat after their trauma. The room listened intently as Maria continued. Dorothy learned to make our sweet potato puree, but more importantly, she learned how to involve the children in cooking as a way to help them heal. The youngest child, who hadn't spoken much since losing his parents, started talking again while helping mash vegetables. The oldest child, who had been acting out at school, found peace in the routine of preparing meals with love. Maria looked directly at the corporate executives. Your company could put that same sweet potato recipe in a jar and sell it in stores. But it would never help those children heal. It would never bring that family together. It would just be expensive baby food. She turned to address the entire room. What we've built isn't really about food. It's about relationships. It's about teaching people that taking care of others, whether it's feeding a baby or involving children in cooking, is an act of love that creates healing and connection. The pharmaceutical company's CEO tried to argue that their mass-produced products could still carry Maria's message, but Maria shook her head. You can't mass-produce love. You can't bottle the feeling a child gets when their grandmother teaches them to cook. You can't manufacture the connection that happens when families work together in the kitchen. Dr. Morrison, who had been torn about the decision, suddenly understood what Maria was saying. She's right, he told the other investors. If we sell to a corporation, we might help more children get better nutrition, but we'll lose what makes this program actually transform families. Richard Blake nodded in agreement. My children didn't change because Maria gave them better food. They changed because she taught me how to connect with them through cooking together. No corporation can package that experience. The corporate representatives left disappointed, but the board unanimously decided to reject the offer. Instead, they committed to growing the program organically, staying true to Maria's vision of person-to-person teaching and community building. 6 months later, that decision proved to be exactly right when something unexpected happened. Dr. Morrison's son, Marcus, now a happy and thriving 2-year-old, was diagnosed with a rare genetic condition that affected his ability to digest certain foods. Traditional medical approaches focused on eliminating problematic foods from his diet, but Maria suggested a different approach. Working with Marcus's doctors, Maria developed specialized recipes that not only met his dietary restrictions, but actually helped improve his digestion through careful combinations of healing foods. More importantly, she taught Dr. Morrison how to involve Marcus in preparing his own special meals, making the child feel empowered rather than limited by his condition. Word spread through the medical community about Marcus's improvement, and soon pediatric gastroenterologists were referring families to Grandmother's Kitchen for support with children who had special dietary needs. This led to the development of specialized programs for families dealing with food allergies, digestive disorders, and eating challenges. This is exactly why we couldn't sell to that corporation, Maria told Dr. Morrison as they watched Marcus happily eating a meal he had helped prepare. A mass-produced product could never adapt to individual children's needs the way a caring person can. The success with special needs children attracted attention from hospitals and medical schools, leading to partnerships that brought grandmother's kitchen programs into pediatric departments across the country. Medical professionals began recognizing that Maria's approach, combining proper nutrition with emotional support and family involvement, often produced better outcomes than traditional medical interventions alone. By the end of the second year, Grandmother's Kitchen was serving over 10,000 families monthly, with waiting lists in every city where they operated. But Maria insisted on maintaining their careful growth approach, ensuring that every new community educator was thoroughly trained, not just in cooking techniques, but in the relationship-building skills that made the program truly effective. Rebecca Santos, who had become the head of community education for the Queen's program, often reflected on how her chance phone call to Maria had led to something so much bigger than either of them had imagined. Her daughter Sophia, now a healthy and happy 4-year-old, often helped teach cooking classes for other children, continuing the cycle of knowledge and care that Maria's grandmother had started generations earlier. The true measure of success came not from financial reports or expansion numbers, but from stories like Dorothy's healing grandchildren in Detroit, Marcus's triumph over his medical challenges, and hundreds of other families who had discovered that the simple act of cooking together could transform their relationships and their lives. 5 years after that first day when Maria comforted baby Emma with homemade sweet potato puree, Grandmother's Kitchen had become something unprecedented in the business world, a company that measured success not just in profits, but in transformed families. The program now operated in over 50 cities, had trained more than 300 community educators, and had directly served over 100,000 families. But the most remarkable transformation was in Maria herself. The shy nanny who had once doubted her ability to contribute to a business was now recognized as one of the most innovative social entrepreneurs in the country. She had been invited to speak at Harvard Business School, consulted with the United Nations on childhood nutrition programs, and had been featured on the cover of Time magazine as one of the most influential people changing how families connect. Yet Maria remained grounded in the simple wisdom that had started it all. She still lived in her modest apartment in Queens, still cooked meals by hand rather than using expensive equipment, and still believed that the most important ingredient in any recipe was love. The company had reached a new milestone when they received a call from the White House. The First Lady, who had heard about Grandmother's Kitchen through her own pediatrician, wanted to explore incorporating Maria's approach into a national childhood nutrition initiative. "Ms. Washington," the First Lady said during their meeting in the Oval Office, "what you've accomplished proves that the solutions to our biggest social challenges often come from the wisdom of ordinary people doing extraordinary things." Maria felt overwhelmed, sitting in the most powerful office in the world, but she remembered her grandmother's advice about staying true to yourself no matter where life takes you. "Thank you, ma'am. But I think what we've really proven is that there's nothing ordinary about the wisdom that gets passed down through families. We just need to listen to it and support it." The White House meeting led to a national pilot program that would bring Grandmother's Kitchen's approach to underserved communities across America. Federal funding would support the training of 1,000 new community educators, while partnerships with major hospitals would integrate the program into pediatric care nationwide. But even as the program expanded to serve millions of families, Maria never lost sight of the individual relationships that made it all meaningful. She still personally trained every head educator, still visited community programs regularly, and still cooked with families whenever possible. Dr. Morrison, whose son Marcus was now a healthy and confident 7-year-old, often reflected on how Maria had changed not just his family, but his entire understanding of what business success could mean. "Before I met Maria, I measured success by stock prices and profit margins," he told a conference of business leaders. "Now I measure it by how many children laughed during dinner with their families." Richard Blake had undergone a similar transformation. His relationship with his children, once strained and awkward, had become one of the strongest parts of his life. Emma and Michael, now teenagers, still cooked with their father every weekend, and both had become advocates for the Grandmother's Kitchen program at their schools. Maria taught me that being a good father isn't about providing expensive experiences, Richard explained to other divorced fathers in a support group he had started. It's about being present, being willing to learn, and showing your children that you value the time you spend together. Rebecca Santos had become one of the program's most successful community educators, eventually opening her own community kitchen in Queens that served over 500 families monthly. Her daughter Sophia, now 9 years old, was fluent in both English and Spanish and often served as a translator for families new to the program. Ms. Maria changed our whole life, Rebecca often told new families. Not because she gave us money or fancy things, but because she showed us that we already had everything we needed to take care of each other. The ripple effects of Maria's work continued to spread in unexpected ways. Medical schools began incorporating her relationship-based approach into their pediatric training programs. Business schools studied Grandmother's Kitchen as an example of how companies could create both social impact and financial sustainability. Social workers and child development specialists sought training in Maria's methods for helping families heal through shared activities, but perhaps the most meaningful recognition came from an unexpected source. On Maria's 60th birthday, she received a package containing hundreds of letters from children and families whose lives had been touched by the program. Each letter told a story of transformation, healing, or connection that had grown from the simple act of cooking together. One letter, from a teenage girl named Ashley, particularly moved Maria. Dear Ms. Maria, you probably don't remember me, but you taught my mom how to cook when I was 5 years old. My parents were getting divorced and I was really sad all the time. When you showed my mom how to make bread with me, it was the first time I felt happy in months. Now I'm 16 and I still bake bread when I'm stressed. But more importantly, my mom and I still cook together every Sunday. Even though my parents did get divorced, our family stayed strong because you taught us how to take care of each other. Thank you for showing us that love comes through our hands when we cook for people we care about. As Maria read Ashley's letter, she thought about her grandmother, who had passed away 20 years earlier but whose wisdom continued to nourish families across the country. She realized that her grandmother's legacy had grown far beyond anything either of them could have imagined. Dr. Morrison found Maria in her apartment that evening, sitting at her kitchen table surrounded by birthday letters from families. How does it feel, he asked, to know that your grandmother's recipes are now helping thousands of families around the world? Maria smiled, looking at a photo of her grandmother that hung on the wall. I think she would be proud but not surprised. She always said that when you plant seeds of love, you never know how big the garden will grow. She gestured to the letters spread across her table. Each one of these families is carrying forward something they learned from us. Their children will grow up knowing how to cook with love, how to connect through food, how to take care of each other. And someday they'll teach their own children and grandchildren. So this is how real change happens, Dr. Morrison said thoughtfully. Not through technology or money, but through wisdom passed from person to person. Exactly, Maria replied. My grandmother couldn't have imagined computers or billionaires or companies that serve 100,000 families. But she understood that the most important things, love, care, connection, they travel from heart to heart, one family at a time. As the sun set over Queens, Maria began preparing dinner in the same kitchen where her grandmother had first taught her to cook with love. Somewhere across the country, thousands of families were sitting down to meals prepared with the same care and intention that had started, with one crying baby and a simple bowl of sweet potato puree. The story that began with Maria comforting Emma had become something far greater than any of them had imagined. Proof that the wisdom of ordinary people, when supported and shared, could indeed change the world, one family at a time.